I remember that night like it was painted in shades of grey. The kind of night where everything feels heavy, where the air itself seems to hold its breath. I was standing in the kitchen. The same kitchen where I had made breakfast for 30 years. The same countertop where I had taught my son to crack eggs without breaking the yolk. The same window where I used to watch him play in the yard. But that night, everything felt different. He walked in slowly. My son. The boy I raised. The man I was so proud of. He stood near the doorway, not quite entering, not quite leaving. His hands were in his pockets. His eyes were on the floor. And I knew. Mothers always know. He cleared his throat softly. And then he said the words that would change everything. Mom, I think it would be better if you stayed somewhere else for a while. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stood there, holding a dish towel I had been folding. My hands went still. My heart went still. Everything went still. He kept talking. His voice was careful. Measured. Like he had practiced this. Like he had rehearsed how to break his mother's heart without sounding cruel. It's not permanent. It's just that things are tense right now. We need space. We need to figure things out. It's better this way. For everyone. For everyone. I wanted to ask him who everyone was. I wanted to ask if I was included in that everyone. But I didn't. Because somewhere deep inside, I already knew the answer. I nodded. Just once. And I saw the relief wash over his face. He had expected a fight. He had expected tears. Maybe even anger. But I gave him none of that. Because what would it change? When your own child tells you that your presence is a problem, what words can fix that? He left the kitchen quickly after that. Like he couldn't bear to stay. Like my silence was louder than any argument could have been. I stood there for a long time, staring at the dish towel in my hands, wondering how we got here, wondering when I became the inconvenience, wondering when love became conditional. That night, I packed a small bag. I didn't take much. Just a few clothes. Some photos. The things that mattered. I moved quietly through the house. The house that used to feel like mine. The house where I had painted walls and chosen curtains and planted flowers in the garden. Now it felt like a place I was no longer welcome. I heard voices upstairs. His voice. Her voice. They were talking in low tones. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. I knew. I had become the topic of their private conversations. The problem they needed to solve. The burden they needed to remove. I zipped my bag. I took one last look around my room. The bed I had slept in. The chair where I read books in the evening light. The small table where I kept my mother's old jewelry box. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad in that moment. I was just empty. I walked down the stairs slowly. Each step felt heavier than the last. The house was silent now. No one came out to stop me. No one came to say goodbye. No one asked me where I was going, or if I would be okay. I opened the front door. The cold night air hit my face. I stepped outside, and I closed the door behind me. Softly, gently, the way I had done 1,000 times before. But this time, I wasn't sure I would ever open it again. I stood on the porch for a moment, looking back at the house. The lights were still on inside. Life was continuing without me. Already. I picked up my bag. I walked to my car. I put the bag in the back seat. I sat in the driver's seat and closed the door. And for the first time that night, I let myself feel it. The weight of it. The pain of it. The unbearable truth of it. My son had chosen silence. He had chosen peace over me. He had chosen his wife's comfort over his mother's dignity. And I had let him. I started the car. I drove away. I didn't look back. Because sometimes, love means knowing when to walk away. Even when every part of you wants to stay. Even when leaving feels like tearing yourself in half. I drove through empty streets. Past familiar places. The park where I used to take him as a child. The school where I dropped him off every morning. The library where we spent Saturday afternoons. All those memories felt distant now. Like they belonged to someone else. Like I was watching my own life from the outside. I reached my sister's house just before midnight. She opened the door in her robe. Her face filled with concern the moment she saw me. She didn't ask questions. She just pulled me inside. She took my bag. She made me tea. She sat with me in silence. And when I finally cried, she held me. She didn't tell me it would be okay. She didn't tell me he would come around. She didn't offer empty comfort. She just held me. And let me break. Because that's what I needed. Not solutions. Not explanations. Just someone to witness my pain. Someone to tell me I wasn't crazy for feeling shattered. I stayed in her guest room that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Replaying everything. Searching for the moment it all went wrong. Trying to find where I failed. But the truth was harder than that. The truth was that I hadn't failed. I had just become inconvenient. And in his new life, there was no room for inconvenience. I thought about all the years I spent raising him. The sleepless nights when he was sick. The school projects we worked on together. The times I went without so he could have what he needed. The dreams I put aside so his could come true. I never asked for gratitude. I never kept score. That's not what mothers do. But I also never imagined this. I never imagined that love could be so easily set aside. That years of devotion could be dismissed with a few careful words and a request to leave. I wondered if he was lying awake too. If he felt the weight of what he had done. If he understood that some doors, once closed, are almost impossible to open again. Or maybe he was sleeping peacefully. Maybe he felt relieved. Maybe my absence had already made his life easier. I didn't know. And that not knowing was its own kind of pain. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains. For a moment, I forgot where I was. And then it all came rushing back. My sister knocked softly on the door. She brought me coffee. She sat on the edge of the bed. "You don't have to talk about it," she said. "But you also don't have to pretend you're fine." I nodded. I took the coffee. I held it between my hands, feeling the warmth. "I just don't understand," I finally said. My voice sounded small. Broken. "I don't understand how he could do this." She looked at me with sad, knowing eyes. Sometimes the people we love the most are capable of hurting us the deepest. Not because they're cruel, but because they're human. And humans are complicated. And selfish. And weak. I wanted to defend him. I wanted to say he wasn't like that. But I couldn't. Because he had been exactly like that. My sister stayed with me that morning. She didn't rush me. She didn't push me to make plans. She just let me exist in my grief. And slowly, very slowly, I started to feel something else beneath the pain. Something small but growing. Anger. Not the loud, explosive kind. But the quiet, steady kind. The kind that comes when you realize you've been disrespected. When you realize your love has been taken for granted. When you realize you deserve better. I thought about the way he had looked at me that night. The distance in his eyes. The rehearsed tone. The relief when I didn't fight back. And I realized something important. He had expected me to make this easy for him. He had expected me to quietly disappear. To not cause problems. To put his comfort above my own dignity. And I had done exactly that. I had packed my bag without protest. I had left without making a scene. I had protected him from his own guilt. But why? Why did I owe him that? Why did I have to shrink myself to make his betrayal easier? I didn't have an answer. But I knew something had shifted. I wasn't just heartbroken anymore. I was awake. I spent the next few days at my sister's house in a strange kind of limbo. I didn't call him. He didn't call me. The silence between us grew wider with each passing hour. I kept waiting for the phone to ring. For him to say he had made a mistake. For him to ask me to come home. But the phone stayed silent. And slowly, I stopped waiting. I started making plans instead. I looked at apartments. Small ones. Ones I could afford on my savings. Places where I could start over. Where I wouldn't be a burden. Where I wouldn't have to walk on eggshells in my own home. It felt strange. Planning a life without him. Planning a life where I wasn't someone's mother first. Where I was just me. Scary. But also strangely freeing. My sister supported me. She helped me look at listings. She came with me to viewings. She never once suggested I go back. She never once told me to forgive and forget. She understood something important. That sometimes love means letting go. That sometimes the people we raised don't become the people we hoped they would be. And that we can't sacrifice ourselves trying to fix that. I found a small apartment after a week. It was on the second floor of an old building. It had large windows and wooden floors, and a tiny balcony overlooking a quiet street. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I signed the lease. I paid the deposit. I scheduled the move. And through it all, my son never called. I wondered if he even noticed I was gone. I wondered if life had gotten easier without me. I wondered if his wife was happier now. I wondered if they talked about me at all. Or if I had simply been erased from their daily life. The wondering hurt. But not as much as I thought it would. Because something was changing inside me. Something I didn't quite understand yet. But something that felt like strength. I moved into my apartment on a Tuesday. My sister helped me carry boxes. We unpacked together. We hung curtains. We arranged furniture. We made the space feel like home. That night, I sat alone in my new living room. Surrounded by my things. In my space. With no one to answer to. And I realized something profound. I had spent 30 years living for someone else. Organizing my life around someone else's needs. finding my purpose in someone else's happiness. And now, for the first time in decades, I had to figure out who I was without that. It was terrifying, but it was also necessary. I thought about calling him, about reaching out, about being the one to bridge the gap. But I didn't, because he was the one who had asked me to leave. He was the one who had broken this. And if he wanted me back in his life, he needed to be the one to say so. I wasn't going to beg for a place in my own son's life. I wasn't going to humiliate myself by chasing someone who had made it clear I wasn't wanted. I had more dignity than that, even if it had taken me this long to remember. So I sat in my quiet apartment, and I let myself grieve, not just for the relationship I had lost, but for the illusion I had held on to. The belief that a mother's love is always enough. That devotion always matters. That family is forever. I grieved for the woman I had been. The one who thought sacrifice was the same as love. The one who believed that giving everything meant you would never be abandoned. I grieved. And then, slowly, I began to let go. Because holding on to people who don't want to be held is not love. It's self-destruction. And I had destroyed myself enough. There is a kind of love that never questions itself. A love so deep and so automatic that it feels like breathing. That was the love I had for my son. From the moment I first held him, still wet and screaming, wrapped in a hospital blanket, I knew my life had changed forever. I was 24. Young. Scared. But so full of hope. His father and I were barely making ends meet back then. We lived in a small apartment with thin walls and a heater that only worked half the time. But none of that mattered. Because we had him. Our perfect, tiny miracle. I used to watch him sleep. For hours. Just watching the rise and fall of his chest. The way his little fingers curled into fists. The way his mouth moved like he was dreaming of milk. I remember thinking that I would do anything for this child. Anything. And I meant it. The early years were hard. His father worked long hours. I stayed home. Not because I didn't want to work, but because we couldn't afford childcare. And I wanted to be there. I wanted to be the one who saw his first steps. Heard his first words. Wiped his tears when he fell. I gave up my job. My friends. My hobbies. My independence. I didn't think of it as giving up. I thought of it as choosing. Choosing him. Choosing motherhood. Choosing love. And I was happy. Tired but happy. He was a bright child. Curious. Always asking questions. Always exploring. I spent my days answering those questions. Reading him books. Taking him to the park. Teaching him how to tie his shoes and write his name and be kind to others. I poured everything into him. Every bit of energy. Every ounce of patience. Every dream I had for myself, I redirected toward him. When he started school, I was the mom who volunteered for every field trip. Who baked cookies for every bake sale. Who stayed up late helping with science projects and book reports. Other mothers complained about how exhausting it was. And it was. But I didn't mind. Because this was my purpose. This was what I was meant to do. His father and I grew apart over the years. Slowly. Quietly. We stopped talking about anything except logistics. Bills. Schedules. Repairs. We became roommates raising a child. But I didn't focus on that. I focused on my son. On making sure he felt loved. Secure. Supported. When his father left, my son was 12. Old enough to understand, but young enough to be deeply hurt. I held him while he cried. I told him it wasn't his fault. I told him that sometimes adults make choices that don't make sense. But that I would always be here. Always. And I meant it. I worked 2 jobs after the divorce. I had to. The child support barely covered the basics. I worked mornings at a medical office and evenings cleaning offices downtown. I was exhausted all the time. But I never let him see it. I showed up to his basketball games. I helped with his homework. I made sure we had dinner together every night, even if I was half asleep by the time we finished. He thrived despite everything. Good grades. Good friends. A good kid. I was so proud. So incredibly proud. People used to tell me I was doing too much. That I needed to take care of myself too. That I couldn't pour from an empty cup. But I didn't feel empty. I felt full. Full of purpose. Full of love. Full of the belief that everything I was doing mattered. When he got accepted to college, I cried. Happy tears. Proud tears. Relieved tears. He had made it. We had made it. I helped him pack. I drove him to campus. I helped him set up his dorm room. And when it was time to leave, I hugged him tight and told him I loved him. Told him to study hard. To make good choices. To call me anytime he needed anything. He hugged me back. Told me he loved me too. told me not to worry, and I drove home alone. Back to the empty house. Back to the quiet. It was the first time in 18 years that I didn't have someone to take care of. And I didn't know what to do with myself. I threw myself into work. I picked up extra shifts. I kept busy, because being still meant feeling the emptiness. And I wasn't ready for that. He called every week at first, then every other week, then once a month. I understood. He was busy. He was building his life. That's what kids are supposed to do. I visited him when I could, brought him care packages, took him out to dinner, listened to him talk about his classes and his friends and his plans. I loved those visits. They reminded me that I still mattered, that I was still needed. When he graduated, I was there. Front row, crying again. So proud of the man he had become. He got a job in the city. A good job. He moved into his own apartment. He was independent. Successful. Everything I had worked for. And then he met her. I remember the first time he told me about her. His voice was different. Lighter. Excited. He was in love. I was happy for him. Of course I was. Every mother wants their child to find love. To be happy. He brought her to meet me a few months later. She was pretty. Polite. Confident. She smiled a lot. She said all the right things. I tried to like her. I wanted to like her. But something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it. Just a feeling. A sense that she was performing. That the smiles were rehearsed. But I pushed that feeling aside. Because I didn't want to be that mother. The one who didn't approve. The one who caused problems. The one who couldn't let go. They got engaged a year later. I was invited to the wedding planning. But my opinions were rarely asked for. And when they were politely ignored. I told myself it didn't matter. It was their wedding. Their life. I was just there to support. The wedding was beautiful. Expensive. I helped pay for some of it. Not because they asked. But because I wanted to. Because that's what mothers do. I watched my son marry this woman. Watched him promise to love her forever. Watched him look at her the way he used to look at me when he was small. With complete trust. Complete devotion. And I felt something I didn't want to admit. A small, shameful feeling. Jealousy. Not because I wanted his romantic love. But because I realized I was no longer the most important woman in his life. And that shift felt like loss. They moved in together. They started building their life. And slowly, I became less central to his world. The phone calls became shorter. The visits less frequent. The excuses more common. Sorry, Mom, we have plans this weekend. Sorry, Mom, it's been a really busy month. Sorry, Mom, maybe next time. I told myself it was normal. That this was what happened when children grew up. That I needed to accept it. To give them space. But it hurt. Quietly. Constantly. When they bought their house, he called to tell me the news. He was so excited. So proud. They had saved up. They had gotten a mortgage. They were homeowners. He invited me to see it. I drove over immediately. I walked through the rooms. I admired the high ceilings and the big backyard and the modern kitchen. And then he said something that made my heart lift. Mom, there's a room downstairs. We were thinking you could stay here. You know, so we can spend more time together. So you're not alone in that apartment. I felt a rush of relief. Of gratitude. Of hope. He still wanted me. He still needed me. I still had a place in his life. I moved in a month later. I sold most of my furniture. Kept only what I needed. I packed my life into boxes and moved into the small room downstairs. It was supposed to be temporary. Just until I figured out my next steps. That's what he said. But I knew. I knew I would stay as long as he let me. Because being near him felt like home. And I had been so lonely without him. At first, it was good. We had dinners together. We watched movies. We talked. It felt like old times. Like we were a family again. But then things started to change. Slowly. Subtly. She started making comments. Little ones. About my cooking. About the way I arranged things in the kitchen. About how I left the bathroom. About how I watched TV too loud. I tried to adjust. I tried to be less intrusive. Less visible. I wanted to be the kind of guest who didn't cause problems. But it was never enough. The comments became more frequent. More pointed. And my son, the boy I had raised to stand up for what was right, said nothing. He just nodded along. Or changed the subject. Or left the room. I started spending more time in my room. I ate dinner in there. I watched TV with headphones. I tried to disappear. But even that wasn't enough. Because the problem wasn't what I did or didn't do. The problem was that I existed. That I was there. That I reminded them that they weren't alone in their perfect little house. I could feel the tension growing. The way they whispered when I walked by. The way conversations stopped when I entered a room. The way my son avoided eye contact. And I knew what was coming. I just didn't want to admit it. Because admitting it meant admitting that the child I had given everything to had decided I was disposable. That all those years of love and sacrifice had led to this. To being an inconvenience. A burden. A problem to be solved. And that truth was too painful to face. So I pretended I didn't notice. I pretended everything was fine. I smiled. I stayed quiet. I made myself smaller and smaller. Until the night he finally said the words. Until the night he asked me to leave. And all that pretending shattered. Because I had been a mother who never walked away. Who never gave up. Who never stopped loving. But none of that had mattered in the end. There are small betrayals. The kind you can forgive. The kind you can forget. And then there are the kind that change you. The kind that rewrite who you thought you were and who you thought they were. This was the second kind. It didn't happen all at once. Betrayal rarely does. It creeps in. Slow. Quiet. Disguised as normal life. Disguised as adjustment. Disguised as nothing worth worrying about. Looking back, I can see it now. The signs. The moments. The shift. But when you're living it, you tell yourself stories. You make excuses. You rationalize. Because the alternative is too painful. The alternative is admitting that someone you love is choosing to hurt you. It started with the little things. Things so small I almost didn't notice. She would rearrange the kitchen after I used it. Not because I had made a mess, but because she wanted it her way. And every time she did it, it sent a message. This is not your space. You're a guest here. I told myself it didn't matter. It was her house. She had every right to arrange things how she wanted. But it did matter. Because it was a reminder. A constant, quiet reminder that I didn't belong. Then came the comments. Oh, you're cooking tonight? I usually do it this way. It's just easier. Did you leave the light on downstairs again? We're trying to save on electricity. I think it's better if you ask before using the washing machine. I have a schedule. Each comment was polite. Reasonable even. But underneath, there was something else. Something sharp. Control. She was establishing her territory. Marking her boundaries. Making sure I knew my place. And my son, the boy who used to defend me from playground bullies, said nothing. He was there for most of these moments. Sitting at the table. Standing in the kitchen. Walking through the hallway. But he never spoke up. Never said, Mom can use the kitchen whenever she wants. Never said, this is her home too. Never said anything that would create conflict with his wife. He chose silence. And silence, I learned, is its own kind of betrayal. I started to notice the way they communicated. The glances. The unspoken understanding. The way she would give him a look, and he would immediately know what she wanted. They were a unit. And I was outside of it. I tried to talk to him once. Just once. We were alone in the living room. She had gone upstairs. It was late evening. The house was quiet. I asked him, is everything okay? Do you need me to do something differently? He looked uncomfortable. Like I had asked him something inappropriate. What do you mean? I just feel like maybe I'm in the way. Maybe I should start looking for my own place. I wanted him to protest. To say, no Mom, you're not in the way. To say, we want you here. Instead, he said, well, if you think that's best. My heart sank. But I forced a smile. I said, I just want to make sure I'm not causing problems. He nodded. Gave me a half smile. And then he changed the subject. That was the moment I knew. I knew that I wasn't wanted. That my presence was tolerated, not cherished. That I had become an obligation. But I still stayed. Because where else would I go? And because some part of me still hoped things would get better. They didn't. She started making plans without including me. Dinners. Outings. Holidays. They would talk about their weekend plans at the breakfast table. And I would sit there, invisible, waiting to see if I was invited. Sometimes I was. Most times I wasn't. And my son never thought to include me. Never said, Mom, do you want to come? Never considered that I might be sitting in the house alone while they were out living their lives. I became a ghost in that house, moving through rooms unnoticed, eating meals in silence, spending evenings alone in my small room downstairs. I would hear them laughing upstairs, talking, living, and I would sit in the dark, wondering how I had become so invisible. I thought about leaving. Every day, I thought about it. But I didn't know where to go. I had given up my apartment. I had spent my savings helping them with the wedding and the house. I had very little left. And more than that, I didn't want to admit defeat. I didn't want to admit that my son didn't want me. That I had failed somehow. That all those years of love had led to this. So I stayed. And I shrank. And I tried to be as unobtrusive as possible. I stopped cooking. Stopped using the common areas. Stopped trying to have conversations. I became what they wanted me to be. Quiet. Invisible. Gone, but still there. And then came the comments about money. She mentioned it casually one night at dinner. Just loud enough for me to hear. It's been hard with the mortgage and the bills. We're really stretching ourselves thin. My son nodded. I know. We'll figure it out. She glanced at me. Just a quick glance. But I felt it. The implication. I started contributing more. Buying groceries. Paying for utilities. Giving them money for this and that. I didn't have much. But I gave what I could. Because I wanted to prove I wasn't a burden. That I was helping. That I deserved to be there. But it didn't matter. The message had already been received. I was costing them. My presence was a financial strain. Another reason I didn't belong. One evening, I overheard them talking. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was just walking past their room. The door was slightly open. Her voice was low but clear. I just think it's hard to have privacy with her here. I feel like we can't relax in our own home. My son responded, but I couldn't make out the words. Just the tone. Agreeable. Understanding. She continued. I know she's your mom. But we have our own lives. We need space. We need to be able to live without feeling like we're being watched. I stepped away. Quietly. My hands were shaking. My chest was tight. I wasn't watching them. I was trying to stay out of their way. But even that was too much. Even my existence in the same house was an intrusion. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. And I realized something. She wanted me gone. And he wasn't going to fight for me. He was choosing her comfort over my dignity. Her feelings over my well-being. His marriage over his mother. And I couldn't even be angry. Because isn't that what you're supposed to do? Choose your spouse? Build your own family? But what about the family that built you? What about the person who sacrificed everything so you could have a life? What about the love that came before? Did that just stop mattering? I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to shake him and ask him how he could do this. How he could treat me like I was nothing. But I did none of that. Because I already knew the answer. He could do it because he had stopped seeing me as a person. I had become a role. A responsibility. A problem. And problems get solved. They get removed. They get asked to leave. The final straw came a few weeks later. They were hosting a dinner party. Friends from work. Colleagues. People I had never met. I asked if I should join or if they wanted privacy. She answered before he could. I think it's better if you stay downstairs. We don't want to overwhelm our guests. I nodded. I said I understood. I went to my room. And I listened to the sounds of laughter and conversation above me. I listened to my son being charming and funny and warm. The way he used to be with me. And I understood. I understood that I had become an embarrassment. Someone to hide. Someone who didn't fit into the life they were building. I packed my bag that night. Quietly. Slowly. I didn't know where I would go. But I knew I couldn't stay. I was going to leave the next morning. I was going to walk out with my dignity intact. I was going to disappear the way they wanted me to. But I didn't get the chance. Because the next evening he came to me. And he said the words himself. And somehow, hearing him say it out loud was worse than anything that had come before. Because it made it real. It made it undeniable. It made it clear that I wasn't imagining things. That I wasn't overreacting. That I truly was unwanted. I had become an inconvenience in my own son's life. And love, I learned, can die quietly. Not with a fight. Not with drama. But with silence. With avoidance. With the slow, steady erosion of care. I had loved him with everything I had. But that love was not enough to make him see me. To make him value me. To make him protect me. And that realization was the deepest betrayal of all. Starting over in your 50s is not what anyone plans for. You're supposed to be settled by then. Comfortable. Secure. But here I was. In a small apartment. With a handful of belongings. And a heart that felt both shattered and strangely light. The first few days were the hardest. I would wake up disoriented. Forgetting where I was. Reaching for routines that no longer existed. I had spent so many years organizing my life around someone else. Around his needs. His schedule. His happiness. Now there was no one to organize around. Just me. And I didn't know who that was anymore. I spent a lot of time sitting by the window. Watching the street below. Watching people go about their lives. Watching the world move forward while I felt stuck. My sister called every day. She never asked if I was okay. She knew I wasn't. She just called to remind me I wasn't alone. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. Sometimes she just stayed on the line while I cried. And that was enough. I thought about calling him. 100 times a day, I thought about it. I would pick up the phone, stare at his name, and then put it down again. Because what would I say? Come back to me? Choose me? Love me the way I loved you. You can't beg someone to see your worth. Either they see it or they don't. And he had made his choice. So I made mine. I chose not to chase. Not to plead. Not to humiliate myself by begging for scraps of affection. I chose to sit in the discomfort. To feel the pain. To grieve what I had lost. And to slowly, painfully start rebuilding. I got a job. Nothing glamorous. Just part-time work at a bookstore downtown. It wasn't much. But it was something. It gave me structure. Purpose. A reason to leave the apartment. The owner was a kind woman in her 60s. She didn't ask a lot of questions. She just gave me tasks. Shelving books. Helping customers. Organizing the back room. I liked the quiet of it. The smell of paper and ink. The gentle hum of people browsing. It felt peaceful. Safe. I started reading again. Something I hadn't done in years. I would take books home from the store. Fiction mostly. Stories about other people's lives. Other people's pain. Other people's survival. It helped. Reading about characters who had lost everything and still found a way forward. It reminded me that this wasn't the end. It was just a chapter. A painful one. But not the final one. I joined a community center nearby. They offered classes. Yoga. Painting. Cooking. I signed up for a few. Not because I was particularly interested. But because I needed to fill the hours. To stop myself from spiraling. The yoga class was full of women my age. Women who had their own stories. Their own losses. We didn't talk about them much. But you could see it in their eyes. The weight they carried. We moved through poses in silence. Breathing together. Stretching together. Healing together in our own quiet ways. I met a woman named Diane. She was in her late 50s. Divorced. Her kids were grown and lived across the country. She understood what it felt like to be alone after spending decades caring for others. We started having coffee after class. Nothing deep. Just small talk. But it helped. It reminded me that I could still connect with people. That I wasn't completely broken. One day, she asked me what had happened. Why I was living alone. Why my son wasn't around. I told her. Not everything. But enough. She listened without judgment. And then she said something I will never forget. You didn't fail as a mother. He failed as a son. And that's not your burden to carry. I cried. Right there in the coffee shop. Because I had been carrying that burden. The belief that I had done something wrong. That I had loved incorrectly. That I was somehow to blame. But maybe I wasn't. Maybe I had done everything right. And he had still chosen to hurt me. Maybe that was just the truth. Painful and unfair. But true. I started writing. Just for myself. In a journal I bought from the bookstore. I wrote about my feelings. My anger. My sadness. My confusion. I wrote letters to my son that I would never send. Letters where I said everything I couldn't say to his face. Where I asked all the questions that haunted me. Why wasn't I enough? Why did you stop seeing me? Why did my love become a burden? Writing helped. It got the thoughts out of my head. It stopped them from consuming me. It gave me a sense of control. Even if it was just control over words on a page. I started taking walks. Long ones. Through the neighborhood. Through the park. Along the river. I would walk for hours. Listening to music. Thinking. Sometimes crying. Sometimes just existing. Those walks became my therapy. My meditation. My way of processing everything I couldn't say out loud. One evening, I walked to a hill that overlooked the city. I sat on a bench and watched the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink and purple. And I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not happiness. Not yet. But peace. A quiet acceptance of where I was. Of what had happened. Of the fact that I was still here. Still breathing. Still moving forward. I realized that I had been so focused on what I had lost that I hadn't noticed what I was gaining. Freedom. Independence. The ability to make choices without considering someone else's needs. I could eat what I wanted. Watch what I wanted. Sleep when I wanted. Live without constantly worrying if I was being too loud or too visible or too much. I didn't have to shrink anymore. I didn't have to apologize for existing. I didn't have to make myself small to fit into someone else's life. This was my life. And for the first time in a long time, it was mine alone. That realization didn't erase the pain. It didn't undo the betrayal. But it gave me something to hold on to. Hope. Not hope that he would come back. but hoped that I could build something new. Something that didn't depend on anyone else's validation. I started making plans. Real plans. I looked into taking classes. Maybe finishing the degree I had started decades ago. Maybe learning something new. I thought about traveling. Nothing extravagant. Just small trips. Places I had always wanted to see, but never had the time or money for. I thought about what I wanted my life to look like. Not what I thought it should look like, but what I actually wanted. And slowly, a picture started to form. A life that was quieter, simpler, but also fuller, richer, more honest. I wasn't there yet. I was still grieving, still angry, still sad, but I was moving. And movement, I learned, is healing. I stopped waiting for the phone to ring. I stopped hoping for an apology. I stopped putting my life on hold for someone who had moved on without me. I chose me. For the first time in 30 years, I chose me. And that choice, terrifying as it was, felt like the beginning of something. Not an ending, but a beginning. A chance to discover who I was when I wasn't defined by someone else. When I wasn't mother first and person second. Just a woman, in her 50s, starting over, scared, but standing. And that was enough. For now, that was enough. They say you don't know what you have until it's gone. I used to think that was a cliché, a phrase people used in movies. But it turns out, it's true. Painfully true. I didn't realize how much I had been holding that house together until I wasn't there anymore. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because that's what you do. You see something that needs doing, and you do it. You don't keep score. You don't wait for praise. But absence has a way of making the invisible suddenly visible. I wasn't there to notice when the plants started wilting, because no one remembered to water them. I wasn't there to quietly restock the toilet paper, or replace the hand soap, or clean the coffee maker. I wasn't there to remember birthdays or anniversaries, or when bills were due. I wasn't there to be the emotional center. The one who asked how everyone's day was. The one who cared about the small, forgettable details that make a house feel like a home. At first, I imagine they barely noticed. Life went on. The house was quieter. Maybe even more peaceful. Exactly what they wanted. But slowly, cracks started to form. My sister heard things through the grapevine. Small town. People talk. She didn't tell me at first. She didn't want to give me false hope or twist the knife deeper. But eventually, she mentioned it. I heard things aren't going so well at the house. I didn't ask for details. I didn't want to seem like I was waiting for them to fail. Like I was gloating. But part of me, the part I'm not proud of, wanted to know. What kind of things? She hesitated. Then she said, just that it's been tense. That they're arguing more. That she's overwhelmed. I didn't say anything. But I felt it. A small, bitter satisfaction. Not because I wanted them to suffer, but because I wanted them to understand. To see what they had dismissed. To realize that I had mattered. Weeks passed. Then months. I stayed focused on my own life. My job. My routines. My healing. But I thought about them. Of course I did. You don't just stop caring about someone because they hurt you. Love doesn't work that way. I wondered if he thought about me. If he missed me. If he regretted what he had done. I wondered if she realized that getting rid of me hadn't solved their problems. That maybe I hadn't been the problem at all. I wondered. But I didn't reach out. Because I had learned something important. You can't make people value you. They either do or they don't. And chasing them only destroys your dignity. One evening, I ran into an old neighbor. Someone who still lived near their house. We chatted briefly. And then she said something that caught me off guard. I saw your son the other day. He looked tired. Really tired. I nodded. Tried to seem uninterested. But my heart was racing. She continued. I think they're going through a rough patch. She's been going to her mother's a lot. They're barely home at the same time. I didn't respond. Just smiled politely and changed the subject. But later that night, alone in my apartment, I let myself feel it. The complicated mix of emotions. Sadness. That their marriage was struggling. That he was hurting. Anger. That he had chosen this. That he had pushed me away to protect a relationship that was falling apart anyway. And something else. Something I didn't want to name. A small, quiet sense of vindication. I wasn't the problem. I had never been the problem. The problem was that they didn't know how to be partners. How to communicate. How to handle stress without finding someone to blame. And without me there to absorb the tension, they had to face each other. And themselves. I heard through my sister that he had called her once. Asked how I was doing. If I was okay. She told him I was fine. That I was adjusting. That I had a job and friends and a life. She didn't tell him how hard it had been. How many nights I cried. How long it took me to feel even remotely okay. She protected me. The way he should have. He didn't ask for my number. Didn't ask to talk to me. Just nodded and said that was good. That he was glad I was okay. Like I was an acquaintance. Someone he used to know. That hurt more than I expected. But it also clarified something. He wasn't coming back. He wasn't going to apologize. He had moved on. Or at least he was pretending to. And I needed to do the same. I stopped asking my sister for updates. I stopped wondering. I stopped hoping. I focused on building my life. On finding joy in small things. On learning to be alone without being lonely. And slowly, I got better at it. I started to notice things I hadn't noticed before. The way morning light looked in my apartment. The sound of rain on the windows. The taste of coffee when I wasn't rushing through it. I started to feel lighter. Like I had put down a weight I didn't realize I was carrying. The weight of trying to be enough for someone who would never see me. The weight of loving someone who had stopped loving me back. The weight of staying somewhere I wasn't wanted. That weight was gone. And in its place was space. Space to breathe. Space to think. Space to be. I didn't hate him. I didn't even resent him. I just felt sad. Sad for what we had lost. Sad for the relationship that could have been. Sad for the mother and son we used to be. But I also felt free. Free from the constant tension. Free from the silent judgment. Free from the need to shrink myself. And that freedom, hard-won and painful as it was worth something. It was worth everything. One afternoon, I was at the bookstore, organizing a display. A customer came in. She was young, maybe late 20s. She had a small child with her. A little boy. He was asking a million questions. Pointing at books. Pulling on her sleeve. Being loud and curious and full of energy. She looked exhausted. But every time he asked a question, she bent down. Answered patiently. Smiled at him, even though you could see the tiredness in her eyes. I watched them. And I felt a pang. Not of regret. But of recognition. That used to be me. That used to be us. And I wondered if that little boy would grow up and remember those moments. If he would remember the way his mother bent down and listened. The way she put his needs above her own. The way she loved him unconditionally. Or if one day, years from now, he would ask her to leave. And forget everything she had given. I hoped not. I hoped he would be different. I hoped he would see her. Value her. Protect her. But I also knew that you can't control how people turn out. You can do everything right and still end up alone. That's the risk of loving someone. You give everything. And you hope. You hope it will be enough. You hope they will remember. You hope they will care. But sometimes they don't. And you have to find a way to live with that. The woman and her son left the store. She waved at me as they went. I waved back. And I felt something unexpected. Gratitude. Gratitude that I had loved deeply. Even if it hadn't been returned. Even if it had ended in pain. Because loving someone that much, that fully, that selflessly is rare. And even though it hurt, I didn't regret it. I regretted how it ended. I regretted the way I was treated. I regretted the silence and the betrayal. But I didn't regret the love itself. That love had been real. It had been pure. It had been mine. And no one could take that away from me. Not even him. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was at work. Shelving books in the back room. My phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. His name. My heart stopped. For a moment, I just stared at it. Watching it ring. Frozen. Part of me wanted to answer immediately. Part of me wanted to throw the phone across the room. I let it ring. Once. Twice. 3 times. And then I answered. Hello. My voice was steady. Calm. I was proud of that. Mom. He sounded different. Tired. Maybe even nervous. Hi. Silence. Long and heavy. I didn't feel it. I waited. How are you? I'm fine. And you? I'm okay. I've been meaning to call. It's been 4 months. I know. I'm sorry. Things have been complicated. Complicated. That word. Like our relationship falling apart was just a scheduling conflict. I see. Another pause. I could hear him breathing. Searching for words. I was wondering if we could talk. Maybe meet up. I miss you. I closed my eyes. Those 3 words. I miss you. Words I had been desperate to hear months ago. Words that would have made me cry with relief. But now, they just made me tired. What do you want to talk about? I just think we should see each other. It's been too long. Whose fault is that? The words came out sharper than I intended. But I didn't take them back. I know. I know it's my fault. That's why I'm calling. I want to fix this. Fix this. Like it was a broken appliance. Like it could be repaired with a conversation. Why now? What? Why are you calling now? What changed? He hesitated. I could hear the discomfort in his silence. I just realized that I haven't been fair to you. That I made mistakes. What mistakes? I could hear him struggling. He wasn't used to this. He wasn't used to me asking questions. Pushing back. I shouldn't have asked you to leave the way I did. It was wrong. It was. Silence again. So will you meet me? Can we talk in person? I don't know. Please, Mom. I really want to see you. I felt something crack inside me. The part of me that was still his mother. The part that still wanted to fix things. To make him feel better. But there was another part. A newer part. A stronger part. The part that remembered the pain. The humiliation. The nights I cried myself to sleep. That part said no. I need to think about it. Okay. I understand. Just let me know. I will. Mom. Yes. I really am sorry. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he understood what he had done. That he felt genuine remorse. But I had learned something important over the past few months. Sorry doesn't mean anything without change. And I didn't know if he was capable of change. I'll call you. Okay. Take care. You too. I hung up. And I stood there in the back room of the bookstore, holding my phone, feeling the weight of the conversation settle over me. He missed me. He wanted to fix things. But did he miss me? Or did he miss what I did for him? Did he want to fix things? Or did he just want to stop feeling guilty? I didn't know. And that uncertainty made everything harder. That evening, I called my sister. I told her about the call. What are you going to do? I don't know. Part of me wants to see him. To hear what he has to say. But another part of me feels like it's a trap. A trap. Like if I go back, nothing will have changed. Like I'll just end up in the same place. Feeling invisible. Feeling unwanted. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know him better than anyone. What does your gut tell you?" My gut tells me he's calling, because things are hard. Not because he actually understands what he did. Then there's your answer. But he's my son. I know. But that doesn't mean you owe him forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That felt harsh. But also true. I thought about it for days. I replayed the conversation over and over. Analyzed every word. Every pause. Every tone. And I realized something. He hadn't actually apologized for what mattered. He said he was sorry for the way he asked me to leave. But he didn't say he was sorry for making me feel unwanted. For choosing his wife's comfort over my dignity. For months of silence. He was sorry for the method. Not the action. And that wasn't enough. I decided to meet him. Not because I wanted to reconcile. But because I needed to say things I hadn't been able to say. I needed him to hear me. Really hear me. We met at a cafe. Neutral ground. Public. Safe. He was already there when I arrived. Sitting at a corner table. He looked older. Worn. There were shadows under his eyes. His hair was messier than usual. He stood when he saw me. Smiled nervously. "Hi, Mom." "Hi." We sat. Ordered coffee. Made small talk about nothing. The weather. Traffic. Surface-level things. And then he finally said it. "I'm really glad you came. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't." He nodded. Looked down at his cup. "I know I hurt you. I know I didn't handle things well. You asked me to leave. You made me feel like I was a burden. You chose silence over defending me." He flinched. Like the words physically hurt. "I know. And I'm sorry. I was in a tough spot. There was a lot of pressure." "Pressure from who?" He didn't answer. But we both knew. "So you threw me away to make things easier." "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" He struggled. Searching for words that would make it sound better. But there were none. I was trying to keep the peace. I thought if I could just make everyone happy, things would settle down. And how did that work out? He looked up at me. His eyes were red. Tired. Sad. It didn't. Things are worse now than they were before. I didn't feel satisfaction hearing that. Just sadness. "I'm sorry to hear that." He shook his head. "You don't have to be sorry. You didn't do anything wrong." I did. Those words. Finally. The acknowledgement I had needed. But it still wasn't enough. "Why did you call me now? What changed?" He hesitated. Then he said she left. "A few weeks ago. We've been separated. She went to stay with her mother." And suddenly, everything made sense. He wasn't calling because he missed me. He was calling because he was alone. Because his marriage was falling apart. Because he needed someone. And I was the fallback. The backup plan. The person he could call when everyone else was gone. I felt anger rising in my chest. Hot and sharp. "So you only want me around when you have no one else?" "No. That's not why I called. Then why? Because I realized that I lost the most important person in my life. And I don't want to lose you forever. You already did. The words came out before I could stop them. Quiet but final. He looked like I had slapped him. Mom, please. No. You don't get to do this. You don't get to throw me away, and then come back when it's convenient. You don't get to treat me like I'm disposable, and then expect me to welcome you with open arms. I'm not asking for that. I'm just asking for a chance. A chance to what? To hurt me again? To make me feel small and invisible and unwanted? Why would I give you that chance? Because I'm your son. And I'm your mother. But that didn't matter when you asked me to leave. He was crying now. Quietly. I had never seen him cry like this. Not since he was a child. Part of me wanted to reach across the table. To comfort him. To tell him it was okay. But it wasn't okay. And I wasn't going to pretend anymore. I need you to understand something. I spent my entire life putting you first. I gave up everything for you. My career. My dreams. My identity. I did it willingly. Happily. Because I loved you. Because I wanted you to have the best life possible. I know. No. You don't. Because if you knew, you wouldn't have treated me the way you did. You wouldn't have let her disrespect me. You wouldn't have chosen silence. You wouldn't have asked me to leave. He was sobbing now. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I believe you're sorry. But sorry doesn't undo the damage. Sorry doesn't erase the months I spent feeling worthless. Sorry doesn't give me back the dignity you took from me. What can I do? Tell me what I can do to make this right. I don't know if you can. He looked up at me. Desperate. Broken. Please don't give up on me. I'm not giving up on you. I'm choosing me. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing me. I stood up. Picked up my bag. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be different. You have to see me. Value me. Respect me. Not because I'm useful, but because I'm your mother. Because I loved you when no one else did. Because I gave you everything. I will. I promise. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And I saw a man. Not the boy I raised. Not the son I adored. But a flawed, broken man who had hurt me. And I realized. I couldn't fix him. I couldn't make him see. I could only choose how I responded. I need time. I need space. And I need you to understand that things will never go back to the way they were. That relationship is gone. If we rebuild, it will be something new. Something with boundaries. Something where I'm not shrinking myself to fit into your life. He nodded. Wiped his eyes. I understand. I hope you do. I walked out of the cafe. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. But my head was clear. I had said what I needed to say. I had spoken my truth. And I had walked away with my dignity intact. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if he would change. I didn't know if we would ever have a real relationship again. But I knew one thing. I would never again accept being treated as less than I was worth. Not by him. Not by anyone. I had found my voice. And I wasn't going to silence it ever again. Coming back was never going to be simple. I knew that. But I also knew I couldn't move forward without resolution. Without truth. Without making sure that if I returned, it would be on my terms. He called me the day after our meeting. And then the next day. And the day after that. At first, I didn't answer. I needed time to process. To think. To decide what I actually wanted. But eventually, I picked up. Mom, thank you for answering. What do you want? I want to talk more. I want to understand what I need to do. I want to make this right. There was something different in his voice. Something raw. Like the mask had finally come off. We met again. This time at a park. Somewhere open. Somewhere I could leave easily if I needed to. He looked even worse than before. Like he hadn't been sleeping. Like the weight of everything was finally catching up to him. We walked in silence for a while. And then he spoke. I talked to her. My wife. We had a long conversation. About everything. And I told her that I was wrong. That I should have defended you. That I let her treat you poorly. That I was a coward. I didn't respond. I just kept walking. She didn't take it well. She said I was choosing you over her. That I was blaming her for everything. Are you? No. I'm blaming myself. But I also told her the truth. That she was disrespectful. That she made you feel unwelcome. And that I allowed it. I stopped walking. Looked at him. And what did she say? She said she wants a divorce. I felt a pang. Not of guilt. But of sadness. For him. For the marriage that was ending. For the pain he was going through. But I also felt something else. Relief. Relief that he was finally facing the truth. That he wasn't hiding anymore. I'm sorry. I'm not. Not really. I think we both knew it wasn't working. We were just too afraid to admit it. We sat on a bench, watched people pass by. Families, couples, kids playing. Do you hate me? He asked quietly. No. Do you forgive me? I don't know yet. That's fair. We sat in silence for a while. And then I said something I had been thinking about for weeks. If I come back, things have to change. This can't be like before. I can't be invisible. I can't be tolerated. I have to be valued. I know. I need my own space. My own life. I'm not coming back to be your housekeeper or your emotional support. I'm coming back as your mother. As someone you respect. I understand. And if I feel disrespected again, I will leave. And I won't come back. Not ever. He nodded. His jaw was tight. His eyes were wet. I don't want to lose you again. Then don't give me a reason to leave. I won't. I promise. I wanted to believe him. But promises are easy. Actions are what matter. Over the next few weeks, we had more conversations. Hard ones. Painful ones. Conversations where I didn't hold back. Where I told him exactly how he had made me feel. Where I laid bare the hurt and the betrayal and the loneliness. And he listened. Really listened. He didn't defend himself. He didn't make excuses. He just listened. And cried. And apologized. It wasn't enough to erase the past. But it was a start. He started seeing a therapist. He told me he needed to understand why he had acted the way he did. Why he had chosen silence. Why he had been so afraid of conflict that he sacrificed the person who loved him most. I was proud of him for that. For taking responsibility. For doing the work. But I also kept my distance. I didn't rush back. I didn't pretend everything was fine. I let him sit in the discomfort. Let him feel the absence. Let him understand what he had lost. One evening, he invited me to dinner. At the house. He said he wanted to cook for me. To show me that he was serious. That things were different. I hesitated. The house held so many painful memories. I wasn't sure I was ready to go back. But I also knew I needed to face it. To see if I could walk into that space without feeling small. I agreed. When I arrived, the house looked different. Cleaner. Less cluttered. The tension I used to feel was gone. He had prepared a meal. Nothing fancy. Just pasta and salad. But he had set the table. Lit candles. Made it feel special. We ate in silence at first. Both of us adjusting to being in the same space again. And then he said, I cleaned out the downstairs room. Your room. I got rid of the storage stuff. Painted the walls. I want it to be yours again. If you decide to come back. I looked at him. Searching his face for sincerity. I'm not asking you to come back right now, he continued. I know you need time. But I want you to know that there's a place for you here. Always. I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But something softer. A loosening of the tightness I had been carrying. Thank you. We talked more that night. About his marriage. About his therapy. About what he was learning. He told me he realized he had spent years trying to avoid conflict. That he thought keeping the peace meant keeping everyone happy. But really, it just meant avoiding hard conversations. Avoiding truth. And in avoiding conflict with her, I created conflict with you. I destroyed the one relationship that actually mattered. I didn't argue with that. Because it was true. Before I left that night, he walked me to my car. And he hugged me. Really hugged me. The way he used to when he was young. Tight and genuine, and full of feeling. I love you, Mom. I know I didn't show it. But I do. I always have. I hugged him back. And I felt tears on my cheeks. I love you too. But love isn't enough. We need respect. We need honesty. We need boundaries. I know. And I'm going to do better. I pulled back. Looked at him. I hope so. Because I can't go through this again. You won't have to. I promise. I got in my car. I drove away. And for the first time in months, I felt something like hope. Not certainty. Not trust. But hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe we could rebuild. That maybe the relationship could be saved. Not resurrected. But rebuilt into something new. Something healthier. It took time. Weeks turned into months. We met regularly. We talked. We worked through the pain. And slowly, very slowly, things started to heal. His divorce finalized. He moved forward with his life. And he made space for me in it. Real space. Not the conditional kind. But the kind that said, you belong here. You matter. I eventually moved back into the house. Not because I needed to. But because I chose to. Because I felt safe. Because I felt valued. But I kept my apartment. Just in case. A safety net. A reminder that I could survive on my own. That I didn't need him. I chose him. And that choice made all the difference. We set boundaries. Clear ones. I had my own space. My own schedule. My own life. I wasn't there to serve. I was there to be family. And he respected that. He didn't just say he would. He actually did. When disagreements happened, we talked. We didn't let things fester. We didn't retreat into silence. It wasn't perfect. Healing never is. But it was real. It was honest. It was built on mutual respect. And that was something we had never had before. One evening, we sat on the back porch together, watching the sunset, drinking tea. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For giving me another chance. For not giving up on me. I didn't do it for you. I did it for me. Because I needed to know if you could change. If this relationship could be real. And it's getting there." He smiled. A real smile. The kind I hadn't seen in years. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see you. To really see you. I'm sorry too. Sorry that I didn't demand to be seen sooner. Sorry that I made myself small. We both made mistakes. We did. But we're fixing them. That's what matters." We sat in comfortable silence. And I felt it. The peace I had been searching for. Not the kind that comes from being needed, but the kind that comes from being valued. I thought about the woman I used to be. The one who would have accepted anything just to be close to him. The one who thought love meant sacrifice without boundaries. She was gone. And I didn't miss her. In her place was someone stronger. Someone who knew her worth. Someone who refused to settle for less. And that woman, I was proud of. A place in someone's life should never be earned through silence. Through shrinking. Through erasing yourself to make room for others. A place should be given freely. With respect. With recognition. With love that doesn't come with conditions. It took me a long time to understand that. Too long. But I understand it now. I think about the woman I was a year ago. Standing in that kitchen. Being told to leave. Packing my bag in silence. Walking out without a fight. I think about how small I felt. How invisible. How disposable. And I think about the woman I am now. Living in a home where I am respected. Where my voice matters. Where my presence is valued. The difference is night and day. Not because he changed. Though he did. But because I changed. Because I learned that love without self-respect is not love. It's self-destruction. I learned that you can't pour from an empty cup. That you can't give endlessly without receiving. That martyrdom is not the same as devotion. I learned that it's okay to walk away. To choose yourself. To say, I deserve better. And I learned that sometimes, walking away is the only thing that wakes people up. That makes them see. That forces them to confront what they've lost. My son and I have a relationship now. A real one. Built on honesty. On boundaries. On mutual respect. It's not the relationship I thought we would have. It's not the one I dreamed of when he was small. When I held him and whispered promises about always being there. But it's better. Because it's real. Because it's chosen. Because neither of us is pretending. He still makes mistakes. We both do. But we talk about them. We don't let resentment build. We don't retreat into silence. And when something feels wrong, I speak up. I don't swallow my feelings to keep the peace. I don't make myself smaller to avoid conflict. I take up space. And he lets me. I've also built a life outside of him. A life that doesn't revolve around being someone's mother. I still work at the bookstore. I still take yoga classes. I still have coffee with Diane and walk along the river. I've started volunteering at a community center, helping other women who are navigating difficult transitions. Divorce. Loss. Starting over. I tell them what I learned. That it's never too late to choose yourself. That walking away doesn't mean you failed. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say no. They listen. Some of them cry. Some of them argue. But all of them hear me. And I hope it helps. I hope it saves them some of the pain I went through. I hope it gives them permission to value themselves. Because that's what I wish someone had told me years ago. That your worth is not determined by how much you give. That love should never require you to disappear. One afternoon, a young woman came to the center. She reminded me of myself. Quiet. Worn down. Trying so hard to please everyone that she had forgotten herself. She told me her story. And it was painfully familiar. A husband who took her for granted. Kids who didn't listen. A life spent serving others with no recognition. I asked her what she wanted. She looked at me like no one had ever asked her that before. I don't know. I just want to feel like I matter. You do matter. But not because of what you do for other people. You matter because you exist. Because you're human. Because your feelings and your needs are just as important as anyone else's. She started crying. And I held her hand. And I told her what I wish someone had told me. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be valued. You deserve a life where you're not constantly sacrificing yourself. How do I do that? You start by saying no. You start by setting boundaries. You start by choosing yourself. Even when it's hard. Even when people get upset. Even when it feels selfish. She nodded, wiped her tears, and I saw something change in her eyes. A spark. A flicker of strength. I see that spark in the mirror now too. Every day. It reminds me how far I've come. How much I've grown. I'm not the same woman I was. I'm stronger. Wiser. More aware of my own worth. And I'm at peace. Real peace. Not the fragile kind that depends on other people's approval, but the deep kind that comes from knowing yourself, accepting yourself, valuing yourself. I don't need my son to complete me. I don't need anyone to complete me. I'm whole on my own, and that wholeness allows me to love him better, to be present without being dependent, to support without losing myself. Our relationship isn't perfect, but it's honest, and that's enough. Some days are harder than others. Some days I remember the pain, the betrayal, the loneliness, but those days are fewer now. And when they come, I remind myself of what I've learned. That I survived. That I rebuilt. That I chose myself. And that choice changed everything. I think about the future now. Not with fear, but with curiosity. With hope. I don't know what it holds. I don't know if my son and I will always be close. I don't know if I'll stay in this house or move somewhere new. But I know I'll be okay. Because I've learned how to take care of myself. How to stand on my own. How to walk away if I need to. That knowledge is power. And freedom. And peace. I look at the woman I've become. And I'm proud of her. Proud of her strength. Her resilience. Her refusal to settle. She didn't give up. She didn't stay broken. She didn't let betrayal define her. She got up. She rebuilt. She chose herself. And in doing so, she found something she didn't know she was looking for. Herself. Not as someone's mother. Not as someone's caretaker. Not as someone's burden. Just as herself. A woman. With worth. With dignity. With a life that belongs to her. And that life, hard-won and scarred as it is beautiful. Because it's mine. Truly mine. And no one can take that away from me. Not ever again. This story is a reminder. To every mother. To every woman. To everyone who has given everything and felt like it wasn't enough. You are enough. You always were. You just needed to believe it. And when you do, everything changes. Not the world around you, but the world inside you. And that's the only world that truly matters. Stand tall. Speak up. Choose yourself. Because you deserve a place in this life. Not one that's earned through sacrifice, but one that's given freely. With respect. With love. With recognition. And if someone can't give you that, walk away. Walk away with your head high and your heart intact. Because you are worth more than being tolerated. More than being convenient. More than being silent. You are worth everything. Remember that. Always.